In Jesus' name, amen. Well, we have a special guest this morning, and I get to introduce him. So we have Pastor Mike Romberger, who is the executive director at Mount Hermon Christian Camp. And we have the blessing to have him come and share this morning. So let's give him a big regen round of applause as he comes up. All right.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. It is a real privilege and joy for Jane and I to be here with you. We've been here a few times. We came here for Pastor Matt's big 50th birthday bash a few years ago. That was a lot of fun. We were here just a few months ago at a service, just enjoying. I was supposed to preach a few years ago. Pastor Matt had asked me to do that, and then I ended up in the hospital with pneumonia. The only time I ever was a patient in a hospital overnight was that week, and so decided not to come preach that week. But so it's a great honor and privilege to be here. Mount Hermon is up and running. Last summer we did have people, yes. And this summer we're at about 80%, so we're getting there. Hopefully next summer we can say we're at 100%. Our summer staff started arriving this week, and that always adds a huge burst of energy, all these college students who show up, and we're excited. And a week from today is when our summer programming begins to start once again. So we're grateful for that. And if you haven't been to Mount Hermon for a while, you know, what happens is the local people often don't show up because it just seems too close. But we would love to have you come. And it's a place where Jesus is in the center of it all, and we'd love to have you come and be a part of the ministry there. So, well, before we came here to California a little over 7 years ago, we lived in Colorado. I pastored a church in Littleton, Colorado for 14 years. And in those years, we developed a lot of very special friendships, as you can imagine, and we raised our kids there. Our two oldest kids still live there. Both are married now. One of them has a grandchild, so we try to get back there as much as we possibly can. And we almost always go back at Christmas time. And when we go back at Christmas time, one of the things we do is we get together with about 6 other couples every year, the same people, and we have dinner together, and then we sit around and share our lives afterwards and get caught up on each other's lives, and then we pray for each other. It's a really special time that we look forward to. And a few of those occasions, our adult kids have come with us. And after one of those occasions, our son-in-law, Eric, looked at me and he said, "Hey, Mike, why is it that your friends are different?" He meant that in a good way. Why are your friends are different? He specifically was talking about my guy friends, nothing wrong with the lady friends, but the guys. He says, what makes them different? And I thought about these guys and I tried to, how could I best answer him? I thought about how, although they were almost all in business, they were putting Jesus first in their life, how they were people who were highly involved in church ministry, elders in the church, leaders. They were not afraid of risk. They were men of great faith. They were mentoring the younger. And ultimately I said to Eric, I said, you know what, I think if I sum it up, it's this, is that they are all in with Jesus. They're all in every way. And even though they have plenty on their plate, they still go all in for Jesus, and they have impact for the lives of others. Unfortunately, so many people are followers of Christ, but they're far from all in. In fact, they might even sit in a service like this. And they might attend from time to time. They might give a little bit of money, but not sacrificially. They might serve in some capacity, but just up to a level that fits with their schedule. They certainly don't want anything to do with leadership and the headaches that go with that. In fact, they might even think, you know what, I'm going to heaven no matter what. It doesn't really matter. Why have those hassles in my life? Why get involved in those ways when everything will be just fine in the long run? The problem with that is that God built us for so much more. God built us to be all in, and we're never more fulfilled in Him and in our own lives than we're all in with Him. So I want you to take your Bibles this morning and turn to the Old Testament book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 17. 2 Chronicles 17. It's about a third of the way through your Old Testament. And if you like, sequential order, it comes right after 1 Chronicles, all right? 2 Chronicles chapter 17. And today I want to introduce you to a man named Jehoshaphat. You may know who he is. You might not know who he is. A Looney Tunes character made his name kind of popular. Yosemite Sam used to say, "Jump in, Jehoshaphat." Some will say his name is Jehoshaphat. Some will say it's Jehoshaphat. I think if you look at it closely, it's actually Jehoshaphat. And his name means Jehovah has judged. And Jehoshaphat is the king of Judah. The king of Judah. You say, well, where's Judah? So what happened in Israel is Israel, which is made up of 12 tribes, it split apart into two kingdoms. The northern kingdom, still called Israel, is the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom, and then just two tribes made up Judah, the southern kingdom, and that's the tribes of Benjamin and Judah. And it was called Judah. Judah, as a nation, followed God sometimes, didn't follow God other times. Where Israel almost always did not follow God after the split had taken place. And Jehoshaphat is the king of Judah, that southern kingdom. Jehoshaphat comes from quite a line in lineage. You maybe have heard of his great-great-great-grandfather. He was a guy named King David. David was a man after God's own heart. David had his issues, David had his sins, but ultimately he was described as a man after God's own heart. He becomes the standard bearer for all the other kings. Jehoshaphat's great-great-grandfather was a guy named Solomon. Solomon, a man of wisdom, a man of great wealth, a man of great popularity, a man of great even fame, I would say. But also a man in the midst of all of that started to drop his guard with the Lord, and he allowed to have idols in the land, worship of other things. Jehoshaphat's great-grandfather was a guy named Rehoboam. It was under Rehoboam that the kingdom split into two, Israel and Judah, and Rehoboam became the king of Judah. Rehoboam increased the amount of idols in the land, and on top of that, he added male cult prostitution into the land, which means now that there was sexual perversion in this land. Things are getting worse. Jehoshaphat's grandfather is a guy named Abijah. Abijah only reigned for 3 years. He reigned after Rehoboam, and it said that he followed in the footsteps of his father, which was not a compliment. And then Jehoshaphat's dad is a guy named Asa, A-S-A. Asa's a reformer. Asa's got a heart for God. Asa, it says, takes the idols from the high places and destroys them, and he kicks out the male cult prostitutes from the land, and he begins the process of turning people's hearts back to God after decades of them falling away from God. And when he dies, he turns over the kingdom to his son Jehoshaphat. Let's look at this description of him. We're going to look at the first 6 verses, and that will be our text today. It's really a summary description of his leadership in life, which are found in chapters 17, 18, 19, and 20. Look at verse 1. Jehoshaphat, his son, Asa's son, reigned in his place and strengthened himself against Israel. He placed forces in all the fortified cities of Judah and set garrisons in the land of Judah and in the cities of Ephraim that Asa, his father, had captured. So stop there for just a second. So what had happened is right on the borderline between Israel and Judah, Asa had captured some of the key cities right along there. And now what Jehoshaphat is doing is he's putting military might in those places as a strong buffer between the two countries. Verse 3. The Lord was with Jehoshaphat because he walked in the earlier ways of his father David. He did not seek the Baals, but sought the God of his father, and walked in his commandments, and not according to the practices of Israel. Therefore the Lord established the kingdom in his hand, and all Judah brought tribute to Jehoshaphat, and he had great riches and honor. His heart was courageous in the ways of the Lord. And furthermore, he took the high places and the Asherim out of Judah. We read in verse 3 that the Lord was with Jehoshaphat. Or as the Good News Bible writes, the Lord blessed Jehoshaphat. Or as Eugene Peterson in The Message puts it, God was on Jehoshaphat's side. Would you like that said about you? God's on your side. God blessed you. God was with you. But the key question is why? Why was God with Jehoshaphat? Why did he bless him? Why was he on his side? And before we look into that and answer that, I want to take a moment and pause and stop to ask the Lord to do what only he can do at a time like this and open us up from the inside out for him. Let's pray. Lord, we ask you to come right now and to do the work that really only you can do. And that is from the inside out. To move us, to shake us, to comfort us, to confront us, to stir us, to open up our hearts to, Lord, what you would have for us today. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So we're going to look this morning at how to be all in. I'm going to give us 3 ways to be all in, and you're going to go, simple to understand, simple to talk about, simple to write down, really challenging to live out. How to be all in with the Lord. Number 1, seek God. Seek God. Easy to talk about, easy to write down, hard to live. Seek God. Seek means to go after. Seek means to pursue. We seek that which brings us personal benefit. We seek an education to get us to a certain career that we want. That'll be to our benefit because that's what we want. We seek a particular relationship because we see the benefit of that relationship, and we seek after it, hoping that'll bring us benefit. We seek certain financial portfolio in order to give us, the proper things for down the road, etc. We seek health benefits to have the right benefit because we see that it benefits us down the road. So when I was in college, I asked some girls out from time to time. I would ask them out, and if they would say yes, we would go on a date. My sophomore year, I was 0 for 7 with those questions. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Not that I remember. And I would ask a girl out, and we'd go on a date. Maybe I'd ask them out for a second date. But usually after that, it was, no. I just didn't see the benefit, if you know what I mean. Nothing wrong with them, but this was not going to be what was going to work out in the long run. This is definitely not going to be for marriage. My junior year at Biola University, I was going to chapel with a friend of mine, and I went up with him to his group of friends, and he introduced me to a girl named Jane. I wanted to seek after her. And I did. I asked her out on a date, and then a second date, and then a third date, and then a fourth date, because I saw the benefit. She was godly. She was fun to be with. She was beautiful. She helped me be myself. There was a 5th date and a 6th date. I continued to seek after her, not stalk her, seek after her. And finally, 3 years later, it took me that long to ask her to marry me. Then the year after that, we finally got married. And now 34 and a half years later, we've been married all these years, so 38 plus years. There we go, yeah. You seek after that which brings you benefit. When we seek after God, we find out the kind of benefit that we get from him. When we seek after him, we find a God who is loving. We find a God who's truthful. We find a God who protects us. We find a God who provides for us. We find a God who forgives us. We find a God who wants a personal relationship with us. We find a God that we fall in love with, and we find a God that we ultimately trust when we find out who he is. How sad it is that so many people never even seek after him because they don't think there's a benefit there. If they could only know the benefits that come from knowing God. Look at verses 3 and part of 4. The Lord was with Jehoshaphat because he walked in the earlier ways of his father David. He said, wait, I thought his dad was Asa. Yeah, his dad is Asa, but David is the standard bearer of all the kings, so it always goes back to him when it comes to spiritual things. He walked in the earlier ways of his father David. He did not seek the Baals, but sought the God of his father. He did not seek the Baals, but sought the God of his father. It's not just what we seek after, but what we don't seek after that makes a difference. And he did not seek the Baals, but sought the God of his father. When I was a teenager, There were two verses in Psalm 119 that really had a huge impact on me. They still have an impact on me, but especially as a young man. And they say this, Psalm 119, verses 9 and 10. How can a young man keep his way pure? By guarding it according to your word. Then it says this, with my whole heart I seek you. Not half-hearted. With my whole heart I seek you. Let me not wander from your commandments. All in. All in. God said to the exiled Jews through Jeremiah the prophet, he said, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. With all your heart. You see, God never plays the game hide and seek. He plays the game seek and you will find. You will find. I mean, what do you find yourself seeking? I mean, really seeking. When you wake up in the morning, where does your mind first go? What are you truly pursuing in your day? Many of the people in the culture around Jehoshaphat were, quote, seeking the Baals. Just like people are seeking the Baals today. You say, what? Well, they have little statues in their home in the backyard they bow down to, these Baals. Not exactly, but somewhat, in different formats. Baal was the most prominent Canaanite god. Baal was the god of the sun, and promised that if you followed after him, it would help with areas like fertility, childbearing, agriculture, cattle, and sexual fulfillment. This god had a lot of ability to make your life better. The promises were big. You'll get to have babies. You're going to have economic wherewithal, success, financial, and sexual pleasure, whatever you want. It was Jehoshaphat's great-great-grandfather who wrote, there's nothing new under the sun. Solomon. That's what we want today, right, in our culture. Make sure we have a family, career, economic success, and sexual pleasure. Baal is an idol. An idol is something you place in God's place. That's an idol. Is placing something in God's place. And let's talk about some of our idols. Some of our Baals today. Financial security. We make sure our retirement benefits are all set up so we'll be okay. We make sure we have investments. We're in the stock market. Anybody been watching the stock market lately? Sports can be an idol. How do you like sports? 7 of you? Seriously? I love sports, especially baseball. For those of you who are baseball fans, those of you who are Giant fans, I see some hands. Just know that nowhere in the Bible is anything positive said about a Giant. Did I say I grew up in Los Angeles? Anyway, sports can be an idol. Politics. Placing our faith in a political system, in a political party, in a political candidate. How's that working out for us, either side of the aisle? Health becomes an idol. If we don't think it's an idol, we just shut the world down the last 2 years over health issues. I'm not saying we shouldn't have. I'm not saying we shouldn't care about politics as well, or sports, or financial security, but I saw a lot of commercials the last year and a half on the need to be vaccinated and boosted, but I don't remember seeing one that said, you need Jesus as your Savior and Lord so that you can get to heaven. Children can be an idol, placing them before the Lord. Relationships, pets, animals in strollers, in the mall. An idol is something you place in God's place. And Jehoshaphat did not seek the Baals, but sought the God of his father. And because of this, it says, the Lord was with Jehoshaphat. He blessed him. He sought after God because he saw his need for God. He saw the benefit of being with him. How do we be all in with the Lord? Make knowing God our first priority of our life. Our son Caleb just graduated from college. He's 22 years old. A few weeks ago, we were on the phone, and he said, "Dad, I don't share this to brag. Today, I want to tell you though, today's a momentous day." I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Today's exactly 500 straight days I've been in God's Word." I said, "Seriously?" Wow. I said, "How do you know?" I mean, he says, "Well, a year ago, I did read through the Bible in a year every day, and I just kept it going this year, and today hits day 500, which is how his mind works. He keeps track of all kind of stuff. And here's the deal. We can tell. We can tell. When you seek after God, it shows. In the famous faith chapter in Hebrews chapter 11, it says, "And without faith, it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him." He rewards those who seek after him. Because when you seek after him, he does not play hide and seek. He plays seek and you will find. And when you find him to be a good God and a loving God and a God who provides and a God who protects and a God who forgives and a God who provides guidance. And when you fall in love with him, you learn you can trust him. And when you trust him, then you can obey him. How do you be all in with God? You seek God and you obey God. Obey him. Easy to talk about, harder to live. When we seek after God, we find him, but we're not going to obey him if we haven't found him to be trustworthy. And how do you find him to be trustworthy? You seek after him and you'll learn who he is. One follows the other. Look at verse 3 again. The Lord was with Jehoshaphat because he walked in the earlier ways of his father David. He did not seek the Baals, but sought the God of his father, and walked in his commandments, and not according to the practices of Israel. He walked in God's commandments and not according to the practices of Israel. Question for you. Don't be too quick to answer this. Question. Have you ever regretted obeying God? Have you ever regretted obeying God? So Jane and I were living in Colorado. Our kids were there. We loved the church that I got to pastor. We saw God working in ways that we'd only heard of in other churches, but now we got to see it in our church. And I'd never been more fulfilled in my entire life. Challenging, absolutely. Was everything rosy? No way. But never been more fulfilled in my entire life. Dear friendships, we talked about that. And then God made it abundantly clear through his call to leave there and to come here. Now, I've been coming to Mount Hermon since I was a little boy. Mom and Dad brought us to family camp from LA. Now still my entire sibling group and all of them come every single year still to family camp every year. It's a place I love. I had never worked one day in camping ministry. Not even as a summer staffer. Not one day. God calls, we come. Jane will tell you that my first 2 years on staff, that it was like my shoes were on the wrong feet. I wasn't coordinated. I was. Still not completely coordinated, but more so than I was then. Left our friends, left our kids. One of our kids has a grandson. Well, had a kid, we have a grandson. But when God calls, you do what he tells you to do. But our lives got harder. Let me ask this. Can you find anywhere in the Bible where someone follows God's specific call to go do something for him, and then their life got easier. Can you find it? Because if you find it, come show me. I haven't seen it yet in here. So obeying God does not mean your life gets easier. In fact, it might mean it gets harder. Jehoshaphat walks in God's commandments, verse 4. What does that mean? Well, there are certainly those who walk away from God, walk away from his teachings, do not seek after him, but seek after the Baals, seek after their own ways, seek after the ways of the culture. Don't see the benefit in God. In fact, don't want anything to do with him. Walking away from his ways, or there's walking in his ways, which is because you sought after him, you found him to be a good God, you trust him, and you realize that his ways are right, and his ways are good, and his ways work. When I follow God's ways, I realize they actually work. They're for my benefit, and for the benefit of those around me. So he walked in his commandments, in his ways. He trusts God, his calling, his pathway, and he obeys the commandments because they know they are the right way to go. It's believing and trusting that God has our best in mind. We're in step with him, close to him, no matter how difficult the circumstances are around us. And get this, not only did Jehoshaphat seek after God and walk in his commandments, but he also, it says verse 4, did not walk according to the practices of Israel. Because Israel had walked away from God. What this really means is this: Jehoshaphat did not walk, get this, in the ways of his culture. Of his culture. Even the Jewish culture which he was a part of. He did not walk according to the practices of Israel. And can I just say this about our culture? Our culture has lost its mind. And how come? Because it chose to walk away from the ways of God. It's chosen not to seek after God, but to seek after the Baals. And it shows in how we think and how we behave. But who likes to go against their culture? Because when you go against culture, you feel isolated and you can be rejected. It can be a lonely place to hang out with a lot of criticism that comes with it. But here's the truth. People and nations walking away from God is nothing new. It's just packaged in different ways over different times of history. This isn't the first time this has happened. And here's what's key to understand. When we get to choose, we get to choose where we walk and who we follow. We get to choose where we walk and who we follow. We're not forced to do that. Due to Jehoshaphat's decision to seek after God, to trust God and to obey God, God blesses him, empowers him, uses him, and honors him. Verse 5. Therefore, the Lord established the kingdom in his hand. And all Judah brought tribute to Jehoshaphat, and he had great riches and honor. Now, just a parenthesis or a be careful, if you will. Remember, this is the king of Judah. This is God's guy. And what God would do, especially for the leaders, the king, he would say, if you follow me, I'm going to show the other nations that I'm going to bless you so they see when you follow me, there's a blessing that comes with it. This is not a guarantee that if we follow God's ways, that riches come to us. Just want to clarify. So God blesses him and establishes his kingdom and gives him great riches and honor in the eyes of others, and they pay tribute to him. Now let me ask you again. Have you ever regretted obeying God? Have you ever regretted staying sexually pure? Have you ever regretted holding your tongue? Have you ever regretted respecting authority? Have you ever regretted choosing to stay with your spouse instead of bolting? Husbands, have you ever regretted nourishing and cherishing your wife? Wives, have you ever regretted honoring and respecting your husband? Have you ever regretted turning the other cheek? Have you ever regretted being honest to your own disadvantage? Have you ever regretted giving generously to the work of the Lord with your money? Have you ever regretted forgiving a person who's deeply hurt you? Have you ever regretted obeying God? And I say to you truthfully, not because it's what I should say, but I say to you truthfully, I have never, ever, not even once regretted obeying God. Oh, my life's gotten harder for it sometimes. But it's a life with no regret when you do that. To be all in, we seek God. When we seek God, we find Him to be a great God. We fall in love with Him. We learn to trust Him. And when we trust Him, then we obey Him. And when we obey Him, then we become courageous for Him. To be all in, we seek God, obey God, which causes us to be courageous for God. Verse 6. His heart, Jehoshaphat's heart, was courageous in the ways of the Lord. And furthermore, he took the high places and the Asherim out of Judah. His heart was courageous in the ways of the Lord. Courage is facing what needs to be faced and doing what needs to be done regardless. Let me say that again. Courage is facing what needs to be faced and doing what needs to be done regardless. Regardless of the pushback, regardless of the criticism, regardless of the outcomes, regardless of getting fired from your job, regardless of a broken relationship. It's facing what needs to be faced and doing what needs to be done regardless. And the times we're living in, we need courageous Christians. Not obnoxious Christians. We got plenty of those. But courageous Christians. Notice what Jehoshaphat was courageous about. It says in verse 6, his heart was courageous in the ways of the Lord. His heart was courageous. He trusted God deep down in his inner being. And because of that, he was willing to stand up for the Lord. If you don't trust God deep down, you will never be courageous in the ways of the Lord. Never. So what did Jehoshaphat do that was so courageous? Verse 6, last part. He took the high places and the Asherim out of Judah. He got rid of the idols. He got rid of the idols of the land. And you might say, oh, come on, Mike. He's the king. He can do that. It's no big deal. That's what kings do. No, not that simple. It actually took him a lot of courage to do this. Why? Because he took on his culture. He took on his culture. This combination of Baal and Asherim that we see here is a combination that gave, if you remember, the ability to make babies, to obtain wealth, to be successful, to experience sexual pleasure. And when you put Baal and Asherim together, you have a powerful set of desires that are promised to be fulfilled and give you a better life. He's not just tearing down his own stuff. He's tearing down the idols for other people. And that takes guts. And that's what we do as leaders, if we're godly leaders. Think of it in the home. As a parent, you should be doing all you can to not have idols in your own life, but you also need to be taking down the idols that you see in your kids' lives as much as you possibly can. To not provide those things in your home. Remember, an idol is placing something in God's place. What are your kids placing in God's place? How can you remove that from them in your home that maybe you're even providing that for them? Certainly, in business, if you're a boss, in a culture today, to choose to have certain things you will do and certain things you will not do or support. We tear down other people's idols. It can come with a cost. It can come with a price. In a church, why are our churches not packed full of people in this area? One of the reasons is people don't want to be their idols messed with. If you're courageous, you're proactive. If you're courageous, you're not passive. You confront, you advocate for. You tear down that which needs to be torn down. If you're courageous, you eat sacred cows if you need to. You refuse to sit on your hands. You stand up when other people are sitting down. You speak up when other people are silent. He is courageous in the ways of the Lord, and he takes on his culture. And he says, not in my kingdom. We're not doing that. So what might be keeping you from being all in? From seeking after God with all of your heart. When you seek him, you'll find him. And you find him to be a good God and a loving God. And a God who provides and protects and forgives. And gives you direction. And when you realize who he is, you then trust him. And when you trust him, you obey him. And when you obey him, you're courageous for him. What's possibly keeping you from that? So, right before we were going to move from Colorado out to here, we had to downsize quite a bit. We were leaving a 3,500 square foot home, which included a basement. In Colorado, there's basements. And we were moving into a place a little over 1,200 square feet. Do the math, that's a third. So you have to get rid of 2/3, which we thought we had until they all brought it. But anyway. And so in the paring down process, one night I went down to our storage room in the basement, which is a nice thing about basements. You have storage rooms. And I took out a tub that had my name on it. And we all had a tub with our name on it. And these are our special things that we've kept over the years. And I opened it up to see if I could pare some things down from this tub. And one of the things I pulled out was a stack of letters, probably about that thick. I'm guessing 22, 23, 24 letters. I'm not sure exactly how many. With a rubber band around them. These were letters I had sent to my mom and dad. And the reason that I had them is that they had moved into a very small retirement, skilled nursing room, really, and they had to get rid of most of their stuff. So they gave us back stuff that we had given to them. So that was a stack of letters. This stack of letters was from a 9-month period in my life. I was 23 years old. I had a year of seminary, and I took a year off, and I traveled with an author and a speaker named Josh McDowell. Some of you maybe heard of him, as an intern. And I was there to learn about speaking and learning the Word of God and all sorts of different things in that 9-month period. Traveled all over the country and a few parts of the world. And it was my letters to my mom and dad through that time. This is before cell phones, long before cell phones, so we actually wrote letters and sent them in the mail. There's a thing called a stamp, and you put it on there, and you send it off. And my mom not only had these letters saved, but they were in chronological order with a rubber band, just perfect there. And so I thought, I think I'll read the first letter. And I'm 51 now when I'm reading these. I'm 58 now. 51 when I was reading these. And I read the first letter, and then I read the second letter. Then I read the third letter, and then the fourth letter, and the fifth letter, and the sixth letter, etc. And I ended up reading all the letters. It took me about an hour and a half, and I read through a 9-month period of my life. And I read from a young man whose heart was passionate for the things of God. I read from a young man who wanted to learn all he could from his experience in his internship, wanted to learn all about speaking, wanted to learn all about God's word, wanted to learn about the different places that we traveled, and got all excited about that. And also there was a whole bunch of stuff written in there about this woman named Jane, that in the middle of that year, we got engaged. So I wrote about the wedding coming up and how I couldn't wait to be her husband and all the things about her. And it was all in this set of letters. And when I got done reading them, I sat there and I asked myself a really hard question. Am I still that guy? Am I still that hungry for the Lord? Am I still that passionate about Jane? Am I still driven to learn like that and to grow like that and to take the next hill like that as this 23-year-old was? And I knew the answer. Not like that. I had learned the buttons to push and the levers to pull and the keys to turn to figure things out over the years. I knew where to go and who to go to. And I was now the mentor. People were coming to me for guidance and wisdom. And I sat there confronted by myself. And I said to the Lord, I want to be that guy again. I want to be that guy again. I have to say I'm still working on that. To be that guy again. Where I seek after God with all of my heart. And when I seek after him, I find him. And I find him to be that amazing God, to fall in love with him all over again. And because of who he is, then I want to obey him no matter what he says, no matter how hard it is, and be courageous for him and take that next hill, no matter how old I get. All in. To seek him, to obey him, to be courageous for him. Let's pray. Lord, it's easy to talk about seek and obey and be courageous. Totally different thing to live it. Lord, maybe it's just to start at the beginning and say, Lord, I'm not seeking you the way that I need to seek after you. And I know that I'll find you if I seek you, Lord. Help me to seek you with all of my heart, wholeheartedly. And that starts today. Today. Lord, when we truly seek after you and follow you, when we obey you, we realize that your word works. It's right. And it's the best for us. Lord, we want it said of our lives in a relationship with you that you are for us, that you are with us, that you bless us. But we know that comes, Lord, through a life of seeking after you from the inside out. May we be all in for you, Lord. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.